Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 23rd episode of the Guilty Pleasures Podcast, the home of No Holds Barred podcasting. Now, on this podcast, we do not shy away from controversy. In fact, we attack it head on. Ben, we hit controversy with an end of days onto a pile of thumbtacks.
Wow, that's not going to be seen on PG WWE TV. That's for damn sure.
No, not at all.
But it will be heard and seen here. That is for sure.
Damn right. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, John DeMedio, a.k.a. Johnny D, a.k.a. Freak V1, and I am here with my esteemed co-host, the great Benjamin Wolfgang. Ben, how is everything going, my friend?
Everything's going well, my friend. I am in a fantastic mood on this lovely Tuesday evening. The last show of 2015 for the Guilty Pleasures Podcast. That's a big deal.
It is. It's, man. I mean, we started this year, and it's pretty crazy to think where we are right now. It's been a great 6 months for sure, and we're very excited to ring in the new year with an episode of the Guilty Pleasures Podcast.
Y2GPP.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to the Guilty Pleasures Podcast. As we mentioned, this is episode 23. To all of our loyal listeners and now our loyal watchers, thank you so much for being with us from day one. We truly appreciate your support. And to all of our new viewers and listeners, thank you for joining. We think you're really going to love this podcast. We certainly bring something different to the table. So Ben, how's everything going, my man? Why don't you tell everyone as well about some exciting things that we have coming up?
Some very exciting things we have coming up. We're doing this episode that you're listening to right now, of course, is going to be our year-end episode where we will basically give out our own version of the Slammy Awards for WWE, as well as our year-end NFL awards and our much-anticipated Scumbag of the year. But next week on the show, be sure you tune in because we have a very special guest, the great Gino Marasco from CageSideSeats.com, the lead writer over at Cage Side Seats, which is one of the best wrestling websites out there. John and I visit Cage Side Seats several times a day. I know I do. It's where I get a lot of my news and a lot of my rumors. Gino is on top of everything in the world of WWE, Lucha Underground, TNA, Ring of Honor, basically everything in the wrestling world, this guy knows about it. So he is excited to come on the show. We are excited to have him, and hopefully this will give us the opportunity and the platform to get our podcast out to the lovely readers of CageSideSeats.com. So be sure you tune in next week. It'll be a very fun and informative episode. We'll get some inside information, some dirt, hopefully, some rumors, some stuff that maybe we haven't heard or talked about before from Gino Marasco next week right here on the show.
Absolutely, man. I'm very excited to have him on. This is going to be huge for us. And we think all of you, the listeners, are really going to enjoy it as well. And next week, we will be going back to our normal format with, WWE review, swipe right, swipe left, some NFL talk, which will be heading into the playoffs as well, as well as Scumbag of the Week and Last Call Life Advice. But this is a special episode for us. This is our year-end review episode, sort of our best of. We're going to give away some awards and sort of the best of the podcast over the last 6 months, Ben. So to all of our listeners and viewers, there are two ways that you can get in touch with us to tell us what you like about the podcast, maybe some things you think we can improve on. You can reach us on Twitter, which is the preferred way, at the GP Podcast. That's the GP Podcast. You can also reach us by email, theguiltypleasurespodcast@gmail.com. And now, Ben...
If you're in the Stone Age, it's still email.
Yes, true. And now we are available, of course, on YouTube. And we have a Facebook page as well, facebook.com/thegppodcast. So please be sure to follow us on both of those.
Absolutely.
So, Ben, why don't we hop right in here? We're going to do our WWE Raw recap, where we sort of take, our 5 big takeaways of the action that we saw from last night. It was an interesting Raw, for sure. Vince McMahon came back, which is always nice to see. So we'll start it off with Vince McMahon and his return to WWE Monday Night Raw. Vince basically came into the ring, confronted Roman Reigns, and while he was doing that, security came in, and they ended up arresting him. And they took him out of the ring and took him to jail, which is sort of a storyline we've seen before for sure, even though that was effective back in the day.
Yes, it was.
It
and
was.
Effective last night, I would argue, too, to a certain degree.
Yeah, we'll see. I might have a little different viewpoint on that. But and then the other thing, Ben, as well, is that Vince McMahon announced that Roman Reigns will face Sheamus next week on Monday Night Raw for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. So, Ben, what were your thoughts on Vince McMahon returning, this segment in general, and then Roman Reigns facing Sheamus next week?
Well, a couple things. I mean, first of all, let's face it, Vince's return here on this episode of Raw was not as impactful as it was a few weeks ago during the Philadelphia Raw, where we were, of course, live when Vince made his return to TV for the first time in over a year. So that was a big deal. It didn't feel like as much of a big deal to me last night. I mean, I will say this. Look, the arrest angle, while a little bit cheesy and a little bit cliched at this point, the crowd seemed somewhat into it, and it did result in an amazing mugshot of Vince McMahon, which I'm sure you saw.
Yes, I
did. I
did.
noticed throughout the night, shortly after it was released, I kept seeing more and more people changing their Twitter profile photo to the picture of Vince McMahon from his mugshot. So that got pretty amusing. There were literally hundreds of people within minutes of that picture coming out who were using it as their profile photo. So look, Vince McMahon is clearly at this point, in my opinion, John, he's trying to basically use his own character, which has years and years, decades really, of equity built up in it to get Roman Reigns over. And it worked to some degree 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia. Didn't quite have the same effect last night. In fact, I kind of wondered exactly what he was doing before he got arrested. He didn't really seem to have much of a point for confronting Roman Reigns. He just kind of seemed to be out there, flapping his gums, basically, as Stone Cold Steve Austin would say, without much in the way of official announcements or really advancing the storyline in any way. We got that at the end, finally, when he came back into the arena and said that Roman Reigns would, in fact, face Sheamus next week on Raw for the World Heavyweight Championship. So, look, that adds a little bit of clarity, I think, to the title picture going forward, right? If you're going to get that match on Raw, you're not going to get it at the Royal Rumble, which, begs the question of who is Roman Reigns going to face for the World Championship at the Royal Rumble. Will it be Triple H or will it be John Cena, Brock Lesnar? We're not sure yet. But, I mean, overall, I thought this was okay. I think that Vince McMahon is the type of character that, at this point, I don't want to see on TV every week.
Right.
I think if they had kept him off a few more weeks, that might have been beneficial. Unless you really have something for this guy to do, don't bring him on the show. Or I guess he shouldn't bring himself on the show since he makes all the decisions. But in the end, I thought it was okay, but not great. What about you? I mean, are you excited, I guess, to see this match next week? And where does Vince McMahon's character go from here in terms of his interaction with Roman Reigns?
Yeah, I'll get to the title match in a second. In regards to this segment with Vince McMahon and him getting arrested, to me, something was just off here. Yeah. Something was off or something was missing. It just didn't have this organic feel to me, and it really didn't feel like it belonged within the show. I don't know why, but and I think the main thing with it is that it had absolutely nothing to do with Roman Reigns,
right?
Which is supposed to be the main reason that you have Vince McMahon come back in the first place, to get Roman Reigns over even more. So to me, that didn't make any sense whatsoever, and like you mentioned, you don't have Vince McMahon available every week, which is probably a good thing. Right. But, it seemed like creative just wasted an entire episode of him, with an inconsequential storyline, more or less, of him getting arrested. I mean, that has no impact really on anything. And this should have centered more around Roman Reigns. All he did really was stand in the ring during all this and smile. And give that smile that you and I both hate. Because it seems like for some reason, whatever creative is doing, they set him up to give that smile every single week. And it's very frustrating. But in terms of the title match, I think it's great that they're having another title match on Raw. I really do. And I'll certainly be looking forward to that, even though I think you and I will both agree that Roman Reigns will undoubtedly retain the World Heavyweight Championship.
You would think so.
Yeah. And so, hopefully this is the last match as well between Roman Reigns and Sheamus, because this feud has totally run its course. I think the fans are getting bored with it. You and I are getting bored with it. And I just don't think that there's any more that the WWE and these two performers, there's not more of a story that they can tell. I mean, this is kind of it to me. They've sort of done everything that they can do in the ring. They had a TLC match, they had a regular match, they had a title match. They've been interconnected for the last month and a half, and it just seems like there's nothing left here. So hopefully this will end this feud between the two of them, and then Roman Reigns can move on to something else, and maybe Sheamus can focus on John Cena a little bit, which we'll get to down the road.
Yeah, and no interaction between Sheamus and Reigns either, which I found a little bit odd. We did get some of that last week, not as much this week. I will say one more thing before I move on here, John. Vince McMahon in his promo, as I'm sure you probably noticed, did mention the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika. Sika, of course, is Roman Reigns' father. They're, The Rock, Yokozuna, Rikishi, a number of folks from this very famous Hanoi wrestling family. Vince McMahon said something a little bit off color that kind of disturbed me about Afa and Sika. He was kind of trying to get heel heat, on Roman Reigns, and basically said that, talking about Afa and Sika, Roman Reigns, you were one generation away from having a bone through your nose, which was just a very off-color, stereotypical, borderline racist thing for him to say, which, part of me was kind of, glad that they were pushing the envelope a little bit, but that to me was a little bit over the top, a little bit off color, and just felt really out of place. Even the crowd in Brooklyn, one of the smartest crowds in the U.S., seemed to be kind of, whoa, didn't know how to react to something like that. So I wonder if Vince McMahon maybe today wishes he hadn't said. What did you think about that? Did that kind of bother you? Did you notice it at the time?
Oh, I did. I certainly noticed it. I was watching it with a couple other people, and that was the first thing I said. It sounded a little racist.
Yes.
Is what it did.
There's no other way around.
Yeah, it certainly was. It did have an Attitude Era feel to it, which I can certainly appreciate. And hopefully, even though Vince may have missed here, or he may have struck out here, at least he was swinging for the fences. And I think WWE needs to do that a little bit more, not play it so safe. So in that sense, I give them a lot of credit. I give Vince a lot of credit for at least trying to push the envelope. But it certainly was a little bit off color. And I agree with you. I think he might regret it a little bit. I don't know if there'll be much backfire from it, because it wasn't the main thing in the promo or the storyline. But yes, definitely something I noticed. And I'm wondering if our viewers and our listeners noticed it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the Attitude Era feel, John, I got a little bit of that from Kevin Owens last night. One of our next big takeaways here. Kevin Owens apparently still pissed off about the Slammy Awards and losing Breakout Star of the Year to Neville, which, in my opinion, he's justifiably upset.
Yeah.
He absolutely should have been the Breakout Star of the Year, but he had a match with Neville, John, and lost it in very short order. Neville gets the win here over Kevin Owens. Certainly good for Neville's career, but Owens snaps after the win by Neville, attacks Neville after the match, comes back out later after Dean Ambrose and the Usos are fighting the League of Nations, and he basically just ambushes Dean Ambrose, gives him a pretty awesome power bomb through the announce table. So that was cool. A little bit of edge from Kevin Owens' character, which is good to see. He seems to be at his best when he's kind of worked up about something, pissed off about something, has a chip on his shoulder about something. So I appreciated that. I guess the question, John, is where exactly, as we always say, where is this going? Is this the start of a big push for Kevin Owens? You have to think he faces Dean Ambrose in a rematch for the Intercontinental title at the Royal Rumble, but it seems like they're making a little bit of a shift here with his character, making him a little bit more unhinged, a little bit more violent, which I appreciate. Is that going to be good for him, and do you think they have a plan for exactly where Kevin Owens is headed as we get closer to WrestleMania?
Well, I definitely think it's good for him.
Yeah.
That's when Kevin Owens is at his best, when he has this ruthless side to him, that ruthless character. That's what made him so successful in NXT. Yeah. Even though he was only there for a short period of time, that's when he really made his mark by being that guy. I love when he does that power bomb onto the apron, the side of the ring. I mean, that's just like the perfect move to express Kevin Owens, when he's being ruthless.
He's trying to hurt the guy.
Exactly. So I do love that side of him. Absolutely. I think it's a great move that they're doing this, but I don't know if creative has a plan here, and I don't think that this is the start of a big push. Maybe down the line he will be, but look, let's face it. He's feuding with Dean Ambrose, Neville, and Dolph Ziggler. Okay, those are all mid-card guys. You and I would love to see Ambrose and Ziggler be main event caliber talent and players here, but the fact is they're not booked that way. Ambrose once in a while gets put up there, but not all the time, and the other two certainly are not. So until he is feuding with someone that's in the main event picture, then I can't consider this the start of a big push. The only way would be if he demolishes all of these guys, and maybe you set up something where Brock Lesnar is the only guy that could take out Kevin Owens because they build him up to be that dominant. But I don't think WWE has that faith in Kevin Owens that they'll push him that far. I don't think he'll get that type of push. I think you and I both hope that he does, but I don't see that happening right now. I would love if it did. I don't think it will happen at this moment. One quick thing I do want to mention. He lost in 13 seconds to Neville. Now, I understand what they were trying to do here. They were trying to give him a reason to be pissed off, but I think there were other ways to do it. I mean, that's absurd that he lost in 13 seconds. I don't care what type of storyline you're running here, Ben. That should never happen, especially to a guy of this caliber. Right. They have him, have him have a 10-minute match, but then Neville wins by rolling him up or something like that, sort of like a cheap win. Then have Owens get pissed off. Not to mention that this could have been a really good match. Oh, yeah. You have two incredible workers. I would have loved to have seen them get some time here, especially with a thin roster, because half the roster was on the Holiday Live tour. So I was pretty disappointed with that. But overall, I don't think Kevin Owens is getting the push that we all want him to, at least right this second. He needs to get out of feuding with these mid-carders.
I agree with that. Look, I'm still intrigued by the idea of a Brock Lesnar Kevin Owens match.
Absolutely.
I think that could be a damn good match. I think the promos alone between Kevin Owens and Paul Heyman would make that feud worthwhile. So I've been pitching that for a potential WrestleMania match now for a while. I don't know if that's a possibility, this year or not, heading into WrestleMania 32. I hope that it is, because I don't think Brock Lesnar, certainly at this point, doesn't really have a lot of clarity as far as where his character is going. Look, for whatever reason, and you've said this many times, they have, it seems to me, a lack of faith in Kevin Owens, for whatever reason it is. We've heard rumors, speaking of Gino Morosco, I know he's written before about these rumors that Vince McMahon doesn't like Kevin Owens because he's fat, because he's out of shape.
Right.
The superstar who has the body type of Kevin Owens can beat somebody who draws money in WWE. I totally disagree with that.
Agreed.
I think that's short-sighted. He's one of the best workers that they have. But for whatever reason, they seem to kind of like, in a way, like Dean Ambrose, he'll get to a certain point and then they'll just kind of pull it back. They won't pull the trigger on a full main event push for the guy. And I don't really know why that is, because it seemed to me early on in his main roster career, which we'll talk about a little later in our awards portion of the show, over the summer feuding with John Cena, that was the best part of WWE TV for a while. That was the best part, certainly as far as in-ring work, and I would argue even on the mic, some of the promos they had going back and forth were some of the most captivating pieces of WWE TV. So to me, the guy has done nothing but show that he's capable of being in a main event, or at least a semi-main event, upper mid-card position on the card. But for whatever reason, WWE is reticent to do that. And I think they're doing that at their own peril, John, because, look, the roster is thin right now. It's not going to get filled out much more by WrestleMania. Orton's not going to be back. Rollins is not going to be back. We're not sure about The Undertaker, Sting, all these guys. So you need a strong Kevin Owens. You don't exactly have, and let's face the facts here too, he's one of the few heels, even in the mid-card, that isn't associated with a stable right now.
Right.
He's his own man. Everybody's either the League of Nations, the Wyatt family, the New Day. He's kind of one of the few pieces that you have on the chessboard to kind of be able to move around to a big-time singles feud with a huge baby face. So I think they need to keep that in mind and use this guy correctly, because, look, I don't want to see him go down the road of a Dolph Ziggler, where he's just a lower mid-card guy who gets jobbed out on Raw over and over again like he did to Neville on Monday night. He's far too talented, in my opinion, for that job.
Yeah, and going back to one thing that you had mentioned, it seems like they only are capable of pushing one guy at a time, isn't it? It's like they can't push multiple people at once, and that kind of blows my mind. And I think that might have something to do a little bit with the fact that we had brought this point up in previous episodes, that it seems like they concentrate everything on one guy or one feud or one storyline. They don't have the ability to do deep storylines for multiple characters or superstars or whatever. And so maybe that has something to do with this. It's just they see one guy, they see Roman Reigns, and they see John Cena pretty much, and they just continue to push them and make them the upper stars. And it seems like they're not doing that with anyone else new. Which is weird because, we keep hearing people saying that they need to make more stars, of course. And I think even WWE would agree with that. The brass in WWE would say that. But you can't make more stars if you push someone and then bring them back and then push them again and bring them back. It's the 50-50 booking thing in a way. And it just doesn't work. And we always say this, Ben, but why can't they just take a chance on somebody? I don't get it. Take a chance. Put fucking Kevin Owens in the top. And guess what? If he fails and he doesn't draw money, then bring his ass back down. But give him a fucking chance. Don't judge him because of the way he looks and then, not give him a chance because of that. That's absurd. Because WWE is not in a position right now to pick and choose, who they think should be at the top and this and that and the other. They need to fucking go for it. They need to bring anyone up there that they can to get some star power on their roster. And so, this is a Kevin Owens thing. It's also other superstars as well. This is, it's not just a Kevin Owens thing, which, Ambrose and Ziggler and all those guys. So I think this is certainly a deeper problem in the WWE. Hopefully Kevin Owens doesn't fall into that rut that Ziggler did, where, he gets a couple chances and then nothing else really. They're just comfortable with him being a mid-card guy, and that would be a shame.
No, yeah, look, the guy, in my opinion, the guy has money written all over him. His ability on the mic is almost second to none right now in WWE. His ability inside the ring, for the stuff that he does for a guy that size, is unbelievable. Yeah. So whatever it is that WWE has a problem with, they need to get over it, because I think he's going to be a key piece for them moving forward.
Yeah, and really quickly, this isn't his third year wrestling. Okay, he's been wrestling. Yeah, he's been wrestling for 15 years, so it's not like he's a young guy that you can take your time with. He's in his prime right now. Maybe even on the downside of his prime. So you need to push him, and you need to do it right now so you can maximize the amount of months and years that you make money with him. Excuse me. So, if they take their time, by the time he gets older, he might not have as much left in the tank that he did at this point. Not to mention, Ben, that the longer someone wrestles, the more injury prone that they get.
Right.
So, if you try to, maybe push Owens a few years from now because you're doing this really slow build, or you're not willing to pull the trigger on him, that might be the bad time to do it, and he might fail just because of his age and all the miles that he has on his tires.
Look, let's face it. He is one of, if not the most believable character, I think, on WWE. He just exudes realism every time he's out there. He just looks like a guy you would see in a bar who might want to kick your ass. And sort of his whole shtick that he has, that he doesn't give a damn about you, all he cares about is making money for his family. That's a great gimmick.
And it's unique. It's a unique gimmick.
And it's probably realistic, too, because I think that seems to me to be his personality. That's why he's in the business. That's what he cares about. He cares about his family, cares about his wife, and about his kids. So, look, the pieces are in place except for the physique. So I guess it kind of just comes down to how big of a deal that is in Vince McMahon's mind.
Right, and we always say that the best characters, the best superstars, are ones that kind of embellish their own personality and their own views on things. And Kevin Owens does that to a T. He is perfect at that, and that's why his character is so believable and it's so great, and people are attracted to him because he has that same sort of vibe. It's different, but he has that Stone Cold vibe. He has that Rock vibe because you can tell that's sort of his personality in a way. And, he just embellishes it, and that's what makes him a great superstar. They need to recognize that, especially because a lot of these characters these days come off as extremely fake. And that they're not natural and organic, and because they're reading promos all the time, stuff like that. They need Kevin Owens, to be pushed because he is that guy, and hopefully he can set an example for the rest of the roster, or maybe for WWE brass to see that they should let these guys be more of themselves and give them a little more freedom.
Just one more thing, John, before you move on to our next topic here. One of the things, and we talked about this in our latest article on CageSideSeats.com, where we laid out 10 things we want from WWE for Christmas. One of those was that we want more cohesion between characters on screen and off screen,
Yes.
meaning like between their lives on Twitter and social media, what they do on screen on WWE TV. And Kevin Owens has that nailed down to a T as well, because he plays himself on Twitter. He goes after people. I've seen numerous reports from other people on Twitter and on Cage Side Seats and a number of other places across the internet who have complimented Kevin Owens on having a great match on Twitter and gotten blocked, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
an example of using your Twitter profile, using social media to get across the fact that your character is a dick who doesn't care about anybody except himself and his family. So he's kind of got all the pieces together. I wish more characters would kind of do that, John.
I 100% agree with you, man. 100%. We could talk about Kevin Owens forever, Ben, but unfortunately we have to move on here. And to a superstar, one of the biggest names in the history of the business. His presence was certainly missed over the past couple months. I think we could all agree on that. That man is John Cena, and he returned for this episode of Monday Night Raw, which was promoted by the company for a couple weeks now, or at least last week. And his return was against Alberto Del Rio for what ended up being for the United States Championship. They went back and forth a little bit about if the title was going to be on the line or not.
It damn well had to be. What a cop-out that would have been.
Absolutely. And didn't they advertise it as if it was going to be a championship match?
They did.
So, like, that would have been complete bullshit if it wasn't.
Yes.
I was a little concerned about that, but thank God they did it. They had a pretty good match here. I think the ending was what we probably expected. If Cena wasn't going to get the title, the League of Nations interfered. John Cena won by disqualification, but we all know that the title does not change via DQ. So Ben, what did you think of Cena's return? Did it live up to the hype in your mind? And where does Cena go from here? Is he going to be feuding with the League of Nations now? Is he going to be in a strict program with Del Rio for the foreseeable future? What do you think?
A couple of things here off the bat, I will say. Look, I got tons of respect for John Cena. He came out to a very smart crowd last night in Brooklyn, a kind of a quote-unquote smart fan
Right.
kind of crowd there. And so, but he's able, as he always seems to be, John, he gets even a smart crowd on his side by the end of his promo. And he was able to do that again last night. And I have a lot of respect for that because there aren't many people who can do that. We've seen Roman Reigns and seen a lot of other guys kind of wilt under the pressure of a crowd that just is shitting on them. And John Cena at this point in his career just seems to almost thrive on it. There was one point, I don't know if you noticed this, but he threw his shirt into the crowd. Somebody threw it back, and he said to Del Rio, "Even this crowd is tougher than you are, dog." And that's a moment that, like a lesser guy, like a Roman Reigns, I've seen that happen to him before. He didn't know what to do.
Right.
But John Cena is able to handle those kind of things pretty much better than anybody else I've ever seen. So even if you don't like the guy, you think he's overrated, pushed too hard, you got to give him a lot of credit for that. Look, it's clear to me he's in a feud with the League of Nations right now. I guess this Del Rio thing is going to continue for a little while. It does make me wonder, John, sort of looking at the big picture, sort of fantasy booking side of this, as we love to do going forward. If you have Roman Reigns in a feud with the League of Nations right now, and John Cena in a feud with the League of Nations right now, that does make me wonder if they're building toward a WrestleMania 32 match between John Cena and Roman Reigns. So I think that makes, look, would it be the greatest match in terms of technical in-ring work that we've ever seen? Probably not, but that is a pretty damn big marquee matchup if you're trying to sell 100,000 tickets for WrestleMania 32 in Dallas. So what I expect to happen is I think it's a mistake to put the U.S. title back on John Cena at this point. I know he always seems to get his win back in feuds like this. Speaking of Kevin Owens, we, of course, saw Kevin Owens get one victory, then John Cena get two in a row, including one by tap out, to kind of get his heat back. I kind of don't think that's going to happen this time. I think Del Rio might actually carry the U.S. title for a while and come out on the other side of this feud with Cena with the belt, and then Cena somehow either wins the Royal Rumble or otherwise gets inserted into the world title picture heading toward WrestleMania. But look, I give him, as far as John Cena's performance yesterday, the match I thought was good. It was better than their Hell in a Cell match by a long shot, in my opinion. So the in-ring work gets a pretty good grade from me. His promo ability gets an A from me. He was able to get the crowd on his side somehow, despite the fact that everybody wanted to hate him when he came out. So, I cross my fingers, I'll knock on wood here that I'm saying this. I'm excited to see what they do with John Cena moving forward, John.
Yeah, look, I want to respond to something you said really quickly first. I don't think that they're going to do Cena versus Reigns at WrestleMania. And I think because I don't think it would be a good situation for them to have their top two baby faces face off against each other, especially when you're trying to build up Roman Reigns as much as you can. Because no matter what, you're going to have the crowd split there. And what you don't want, what you want in theory.
Well, not to interrupt, John, but wouldn't the crowd be split on both of them anyway? I mean, half the crowd boos Cena all the time anyway, and half the crowd was booing Reigns for a while. So wouldn't you kind of get that reaction anyway?
Potentially, but their goal is to get everyone to cheer Roman Reigns. And if you have him facing a heel, at least there's a chance that everyone will cheer Roman Reigns, as opposed if you're putting him against Cena, you're forcing the crowd to choose here. And if you're trying to build Roman Reigns to be your top babyface, to me, that's just not how you do it. I think you do everything you can to get the crowd behind him, and I think it might be a step back for him to have him face Cena, in this situation, especially, Ben, if he loses. That would be really bad. So, who knows there. But, look, I think with this, especially with Cena's return, I think they could have made a bigger deal about it. I really do. I think, they hyped it up a little bit last week, but I thought in terms of, for this show, for Monday Night Raw, I thought he should have come out near the beginning of the show to then hype the match with Alberto Del Rio later on in the night, because we didn't hear from Cena at all. And so, I was kind of thinking like, oh, where is he? Where is he? This is kind of odd. Because when you have a guy who's that big, your top star coming back, you would think he would be, if not in the opening promo, maybe the one right after that. You think he'd get a bigger spot. So I was actually really surprised about that. But in terms of Cena with the League of Nations, I'm totally fine with it. I'm totally fine with that, so long as Roman Reigns moves on from feuding with the League of Nations. What I do not want to see for the next 2 months, is John Cena and Roman Reigns teaming up to take on the League of Nations. That's not good to me. That's not fun. I'm not going to enjoy that. That's not going to do anything, in my opinion, for Roman Reigns' growth either.
He'll be overshadowed by John Cena every time he's out there.
Exactly, which goes kind of to my point with the WrestleMania match as well between the two. I don't think you put those two together right now. You have them do separate things. Make Roman Reigns his own man, and have him move on from this League of Nations feud, because, like I said before when we were talking about Sheamus and this title match, it's run its course. There's nothing else to see. Reigns has dominated the League of Nations. Every time it's him in the League of Nations, he crushes them. They've never gone over him once.
No.
So that's enough. Get Roman Reigns out of there. Replace him with Cena. I'm fine with that, so long as Reigns takes another route here and goes into a different direction.
I think that's probably the way they're going to go. I don't really see any other route for them to go. I mean, it does make me wonder. I mean, the League of Nations, we talked about the League of Nations last week. I don't really know where they're going from here because, as you said, they're not going over in this Roman Reigns feud. They're damn sure not going over in a feud against John Cena. I mean, that's for sure. I know they just recently announced that Brock Lesnar is going to face Sheamus at an upcoming match, I think, in Madison Square Garden before he makes his return to Raw. So, I mean, I can't imagine Sheamus going over Brock Lesnar. So you're going to have the League of Nations going down to Reigns, Cena, and Lesnar. So if your goal is to build them as a top-level heel stable, this probably isn't the way to do that. So I don't know where they're headed. They seem to be firmly planted back in the mid-card at this point, in my view. As far as Cena, we'll see. He's going to have a big money match at WrestleMania. If it's not against Reigns, I don't know. Undertaker, maybe? Who knows? I guess we'll have to see where John Cena goes from here. John, we've referenced the Brooklyn crowd here a couple times. I want to talk about that as our last takeaway. We should also mention, too, off the bat, I think you alluded to this earlier in the show, that if you noticed some matches going longer last night and a lot of stars not on the show, it's because WWE was holding a second event in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which John had tickets to and sold so he could watch Monday Night Raw to prepare for this podcast. That is John's level of commitment.
That's fucking commitment, baby. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Har for you, for sure. But what a strange decision by WWE to book an event, a house show essentially,
Right.
on the same night as Monday Night Raw. Do you have any idea why they would do that? And I mean, I just don't understand. You're missing the Wyatts, you're missing Kane, you're missing Charlotte, you're missing Dolph Ziggler, you're missing all these people. We'll have to ask Gino Morosco next week if he knows exactly why WWE is going that road, because it makes no sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
No, not at all. And we were, first of all, it has to be about money. It has to be them just trying to make as much money as possible. But I remember when I got the tickets, someone actually gave them to me as a present. You and I were talking about it. We were like, wait a minute. I have tickets to this event. It's on the same night as Monday Night Raw. We were like, is that possible? We thought there might have been an error or something like that, because I've never heard of this before where a house show was on the same night as Monday Night Raw. So you and I were very confused for a long time, and then we finally, we said, hey, shit, they really must be doing this. And yeah, it makes absolutely no sense. I have no idea why they're doing it, except for the money. That's the only reason.
It's got to be a money-making thing, but I think it hurt the quality of Raw.
Yeah.
To a degree, and it had to have hurt the quality of the house show. I can't imagine the house show was that good, missing all the big names that were on Raw. But anyway, speaking of the crowd that was there at Raw, again, a very smart crowd in Brooklyn. These East Coast crowds, where John and I both live. I'm in Washington, D.C., so I'm familiar with this. John's in Philadelphia, probably the smartest of all the smart mark wrestling towns in the United States, of course, and generally the most hostile to everything. They were brutal last night, John. I'm going to kind of call them out, I think, a little bit here. I think as smart wrestling fans, there are times we need to kind of get over ourselves and not just intentionally sabotage every single thing that we see. And I think they kind of did that last night to a degree. We had a pretty damn good match between Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks to open the show here. Look, we've been saying, and again, smart fans have been saying for a long time, that if you give some of these divas, especially the ones from NXT, Charlotte, Sasha, and Becky, more time to tell a story inside the ring, that they can put on a match that's as good as any man possibly can in WWE. Well, look, they got that time last night. They had a 20-minute match on Monday Night Raw, and partly because half the roster was missing, so they had to fill time somehow. Was this the best Divas match I've ever seen? No. Was it a match of the year candidate? No. Was it sloppy at points? Yes. But they gave us what we wanted in terms of putting the Divas out there, giving them all the time they needed, and they told a damn good story in the ring with Sasha Banks going over, which was the right move. The crowd shit on this match constantly, chanted boring, chanted a number of other things throughout the entire match. They almost derailed the opening promo between Vince McMahon and Roman Reigns by chanting for Daniel Bryan and CM Punk so loudly at points that even Vince McMahon had to acknowledge them. So look, I love going to shows, and I love chanting John Cena sucks when he comes out when I go to Monday Night Raw, even though I love John Cena. So I get it. I'm certainly kind of to a degree one of those fans, but to me, John, they went overboard. They hijacked the show, and not in a good way. They sabotaged things that I think had a chance to be really good and went off the rails because of the crowd, and I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
There's a difference to me between what we saw last night and what we saw in Philadelphia at the Royal Rumble. That was a crowd reacting to a horrendous booking decision that 99% of fans disagreed with, saw coming a mile away, and couldn't believe WWE was stupid enough to actually do it. So that's different than just totally taking over a match when the match is exactly what you've been asking for the past 6 months. So get over yourselves, I think, the internet wrestling community to a certain degree. What did you think of the crowd last night? Am I blowing this out of proportion, or did you feel the same way?
No, you're not. You're not. And look, I'm all about crowds voicing their opinions, okay? I'm all about it, but to a point. Okay? It's one thing to voice your opinion about a storyline or something like that, to try and show the WWE that it absolutely sucks. But it's another thing entirely to be completely disrespectful to the competitors in the ring who are doing their best. And to me, the whole thing with Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch, it especially didn't make any sense to me because they were booing the two divas in that division that everyone wants to see get pushed.
Probably the two most talented in-ring performers in the Divas.
Exactly. Everyone on the internet and everything is always like, we want more Sasha Banks. We want more Becky Lynch. Make her credible. All this stuff. And you fucking got it, and now you were chanting, this is boring. Like, it's so hypocritical, and it makes all of us look really bad. And I'm sure the WWE is now thinking, well, the crowd fucking hated this.
That's it.
You know, and the crowd hated this, so why would we give them this now? Like, clearly they're not interested in Sasha Banks. Clearly they're not interested in Becky Lynch, when that couldn't be further from the truth. So yeah, I was extremely disappointed with that. I was very upset. Hopefully it's not a step back for the Divas division, especially these two competitors who we both want to see, you know, at the top of the Divas division. But this was so fucking stupid, especially with that. I was very disappointed. A lot of the things that they chanted and the things that they were voicing their opinion about, I was okay with, for the most part. But yeah, I thought the CM Punk, Daniel Bryan thing, like, come on, man. This is the opening promo. Like, you know, we're trying to get into the show. You got to at least give the WWE a chance. You got to give them a fucking chance to win you over for the episode of Raw. The crowd didn't even do that. It's like they went into the show and they said, we're going to fucking hijack this shit from Jump Street. And that's really disrespectful. And it doesn't make the show as good when you do that. I mean, it kind of ruins it, I think. Probably for the people in the crowd that didn't want to do that, and for us watching at home. It ruined it a little bit for me because I feel awkward when I hear that. I feel uncomfortable because
It's tough to watch sometimes.
yeah, because I put myself in the shoes of Vince McMahon and Roman Reigns, who are in the ring trying to remember their lines, trying to deliver a compelling promo, and no one's even giving them a chance. And that's really fucked up, in my opinion. So yeah, a couple things that the crowd did I was completely against. I don't think it's okay. Everything else, and normally what crowds do, I'm totally fine with.
I agree. I will be curious to get Gino's take next week from Cage Side Seats, of course. I know he's interested in crowd reactions too. But you hit on the biggest, I think, negative coming out of this now is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Vince McMahon, the WWE heard the crowd. You know, we've been calling for longer Divas matches, more Sasha Banks, and they gave it to us, and the crowd shit on it. So now the only possible reaction I imagine that Vince is going to have is, see, we gave them what they said they wanted. They didn't like it, so no more 20-minute matches from Sasha Banks in the foreseeable future, and that's a damn shame, John.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's kind of the opposite, but the same thing with Roman Reigns and when we went to Raw. Because Roman Reigns had always gotten booed, and then for some, you know, he was cheered at Raw, which you and I completely didn't expect. And so now, we had mentioned that Vince McMahon was sitting there thinking, I fucking did it. Everything I did for the past 12 months, there was a reason for it, and it worked. When, in theory, it was only because of the last 24 hours that it fucking worked, and the previous 11 and a half months were a complete disaster and an absolute joke. So, you know, it's the same sort of thing. I figure I had to bring that up, especially because we were at that Monday Night Raw as well.
If there's one thing Vince McMahon does not need, it's further affirmation that everything he's doing is right. I mean, God knows every wrestling fan can attest to that.
That's
so, John,
true.
that wraps up our takeaways from Monday Night Raw. Certainly a little bit more of an interesting episode than I anticipated, so I'll be curious to see where WWE goes from here. But it's time for our official year-end WWE Awards. These are our take on the Slammies. We don't have a catchy name for them, but we'll come up with one after the fact, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, John, we're going to kind of go through just a list here. We're not going to copy the Slammies exactly. Some of the categories will be the same. Some of them will be different. But we'll start off with one of the big ones here. WWE Superstar of the Year, which is basically our definition of that is superstar who took the biggest step forward in his or her career over the course of 2015. Got the biggest push, made the most strides, in terms of in-ring work and promo ability. Had the best matches, certainly for sure, and generally was the focus more often than not of the company. So there's not a lot of suspense here, probably for this one. If you've been listening to this show, John, my superstar of the year is Seth Rollins, despite the fact that he got hurt in November and had to relinquish the title without having lost it in the ring. Look, this guy was, for 10 months until he got hurt, the focus of Monday Night Raw every single week.
He was the show.
He was the show. He was asked to come out and open the show more often than not with a promo in the ring. And then he was asked time and time again on Raw occasionally and every single pay-per-view to headline it and put on a damn good match. And he did just about every time. Whether it was with John Cena, Randy Orton, the triple threat with Brock Lesnar, even Sting and Kane, he carried to watchable matches on pay-per-view, which is a damn good accomplishment on his part. So to think of where he was, even 18 months ago, 24 months ago, as just one cog in the Shield. There's no question he took the biggest step forward in my mind in 2015. So it's almost not even close. I guess if I had to pick a runner-up, it'd be John Cena just for his in-ring work in the U.S. Open Challenge. But to me, it's really not close. Cena's a distant second. Rollins is the superstar of the year by a long shot.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. There's no doubt about it. It's Seth Rollins. I've actually read on other things that people didn't agree. Writers from wrestling websites didn't agree with Seth Rollins being the superstar of the year, and that just fucking blows my mind. I mean, I don't understand that whatsoever. Maybe they were judging it on a different scale or whatever, but that doesn't make any fucking sense. It's undoubtedly Seth Rollins. As you said, every single night he busted his ass in the ring, on the microphone, and let's face it, he had to overcome facing terrible opponents sometimes, and you know, in his title matches for the most part, and horrible booking and storylines. I mean, he was booked to look extremely weak, and somehow he had to overcome that and still sell. You know, he everything that he was asked to do, he did it extremely well. And you know, he was put in really bad situations, really bad ones, and look, he came through. And that's what you want in your superstar of the year. That's what you want in your being the guy in the company. He was that, man. And they could, like you said, they could rely on him every single night. And he didn't miss a single episode of Monday Night Raw and the entire year until he got hurt. And he was usually on SmackDown every single week as well, and wrestling.
That's some damn good matches on SmackDown.
Yeah, and not just like showing up. He was wrestling a lot of the time as well. So, I mean, this guy was doing it all. I guess when you think about it in that sense, are we that surprised he got hurt?
Yeah.
Not really, I guess, because they were fucking running him into the ground. And maybe this is a lesson for them for what to do with Roman Reigns, and maybe to back off on his workload a little bit when he's World Heavyweight Champion. Because, you know, but look, that's another thing for another time. Seth Rollins, 100%. He did everything he was asked. He showed up every week. He was brilliant in the ring. He made great strides on the mic. He is your superstar of the year, bar none.
No question about it. No question about it.
Ben, second category here, match of the year. Ooh, there were a lot of contenders this year, I feel like, for match of the year. Although the storylines fucking sucked in 2015 for WWE, the in-ring work was pretty spectacular for the most part.
It was.
And, you know, very, very gifted athletic superstars on the roster right now. There were a lot to choose from, but I think you know my answer here, Ben. My match of the year was the triple threat at the Royal Rumble for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship between Seth Rollins, John Cena, and Brock Lesnar, who are actually my top three superstars for 2015. Yeah. I would have Rollins, Cena, Lesnar in that order as my top three superstars of the year. So you have all that star power, and there was incredible action. There were unbelievable spots in that match, including Seth Rollins diving off the top rope onto the table with a flying elbow onto Brock Lesnar. You had him doing the Phoenix Splash, which that was the first time that he broke that out. So that was amazing to see. I mean, that was fucking incredible. And there was an unpredictable finish as well. People forget that. Everyone forgets that Lesnar was hurt on the table. He actually wasn't in the match for a good amount of it. So people didn't know if that was real or not. Yeah. People thought, oh my God, he might legitimately be hurt. We might get a new champion here between Rollins and Cena. But, you know, there wasn't. He came back, so it was unpredictable. It was a great finish. All of the superstars in this match came out looking strong, which I thought was very important. Seth Rollins looked incredibly strong coming out of this match, even in taking the loss. But yeah, overall, this is absolutely my match of the year, and it was absolutely incredible with three of the biggest stars in the company.
Look, I got to agree. I think this was probably the first step towards Seth Rollins becoming the main event.
Yes.
Game for the rest of the year, because a lot of people were talking about Seth Rollins coming out of this match. Look, it's impressive the fact that this was, 11 months ago, and it still holds up. I mean, I watched this a few weeks ago on the WWE Network, and it was fantastic. You and I watched the Royal Rumble together and watched this match again later the same night, because that's how damn good it was. It was unbelievable, had all kinds of drama in it. The star power was off the charts, and Brock Lesnar at that point was about as over as you could possibly be in Philadelphia. So that was incredible. I will give some honorable mentions here to matches that didn't quite make it, in my opinion.
Oh, Ben, really quickly, Ben. And also, Brock Lesnar hadn't been in the ring for a long time up until that match. So I think that made it even more appealing because we hadn't seen Lesnar wrestle for months.
Since Night of Champions, I believe, the previous year where he faced John Cena. That's right. I will give an honorable mention to Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins at Money in the Bank in a ladder match. That was a damn good world title match.
Awesome.
John Cena versus Cesaro on Monday Night Raw for the U.S. title was the best match on Raw probably in 5 years that I can remember. John Cena versus Seth Rollins, title for title at SummerSlam, was a fantastic match. Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar at Hell in a Cell, which actually won the Slammy for Match of the Year, deserves a mention here, as does the first John Cena versus Kevin Owens match. So you're right, when you do sit down and go through some of the in-ring action that we saw this year, John, it is pretty spectacular, unlike some of the booking, which leads us into our next category. We'll focus on the positive aspects, because there were some positive aspects of booking. The next category is the best booking decision or best booking move, if you want to put it that way, by WWE in 2015.
Yeah,
John,
I think for 2015, Ben, it's like picking out the prettiest turd in a pile of shit.
I think that's probably about right. The next category, spoiler alert, is worst booking decision of the year, and I've got about an 8-way tie for that coming up. But John, what was in your view just the best thing that WWE did creatively throughout the year?
Yeah, well, all kidding aside, this was a great booking decision in my book here. It's Seth Rollins cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania. And this is kind of, I mean, there were some very good booking decisions, definitely not as many as the bad ones, but this was one of the best. Look, we have to remember at the time when this happened that WWE was in a really tough spot with Roman Reigns. He had just won the Royal Rumble. He got booed out of the building. No one wanted to see him as the champion because they thought he was being pushed down our throats, which he was. So, to me, they needed to do this, and they did. They needed to have Rollins cash in because, like I said, people would have rejected Reigns as a champion if he had won that match against Brock Lesnar. That wouldn't have been good. And Brock Lesnar, it seems like, didn't really have enough dates booked, the rest of the year, at least in the near future after WrestleMania, to sort of be like a fighting champ and to have the title be, the centerpiece of programming, which you and I admit it should always be. So, I thought this was absolutely the right move for those reasons. I don't... Putting the title on Reigns would have been a massive mistake.
Credit, they realized that. Maybe at the last minute, but they realized
exactly, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, let's remember, they had Reigns winning the title. And they did this at the last second pretty much from everything that we've heard. So, and that sort of adds to it of how good of a decision it was, especially because they realized it. They realized they had made a mistake potentially, and they corrected that, which shows a lot, in my opinion. It showed that, they're not completely stuck in their ways. They could see a disaster coming, and they went in a different direction. They don't do that a lot. But, let's give them credit for when they did do it. So certainly this was my best booking decision for the year. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. My best booking decision of the year, John, is actually going to be, and I'm not sure who gets the credit for this, if it's the creative team or if it's John Cena, but deciding to start the U.S. Open Challenge on Monday Night Raw coming out of WrestleMania to me was the best creative decision that WWE made all year. I know, we didn't really know what to make of this because John Cena, better or worse, wasn't known as the best worker in the world up until that point. So we weren't sure really what to think of it. But this became, for, 6 months, or maybe even longer than that, probably the best part of Raw every week. I mean, this guy had amazing matches with Neville, with Sami Zayn, with Rusev, with Cesaro, as we mentioned earlier, just a number of guys. I mean, he seemed to go up and down the roster against everybody versus Dean Ambrose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fantastic matches every single week. The Cena-Cesaro match on Raw for the U.S. title to me was the second best match of the year. That was my runner-up to the triple threat match from the Royal Rumble. So this worked on a number of fronts. It got Cena In a way, I think I got Cena over with the crowd
Yeah.
more than he was before.
Yep.
Because, at some point, you can't really boo a guy who's just going out there and busting his ass he doesn't have to do that. He's a made man at this point. I'm sure if he had said, no, I don't want to go out and wrestle a 25, 30-minute match every week on Raw, he wouldn't have done it. But, it seems to me, best as I can tell, he was willing to do that, and that's a testament to him and a testament to the creative team that they had the faith in him to do it, and then came up with great opponents for him every week and let them do their thing. So that, to me, was the best booking decision of the year. Questionable at first, but in the end, I think it paid dividends, produced a lot of great matches, and helped John Cena, I think, really, for anybody who doubted his in-ring ability, I think a lot of those doubts were put to rest here with the U.S. Open Challenge.
Yeah, I agree, and it helped the guys that he faced.
Oh,
let's face it. I mean, that Cesaro match was gigantic because the Cesaro section signs came after that match. So that match put Cesaro over even more. And he also did that with a lot of other guys. I mean, Sami Zayn unfortunately got hurt, but he would have been, I would assume, primed for a pretty big push. After that, everyone got to see how amazing he is in the ring. I mean, all of his matches made the opponent look very good. So not only did it do great things for John Cena, it did great things for everyone that he faced. And I feel like what else can you ask for out of a guy like that? And, I think there's this narrative that John Cena seems to be selfish because, he buries everyone, quote unquote. I think that was the narrative, before this challenge. A lot, with the Nexus that happened and with other situations where he seemed to always bury an up-and-comer, but he seemed to put over a lot of guys here, even though he won every time. He made everyone he faced look really strong. So I completely agree with you there, for sure. Ben, oh boy. I mean, I'm just I'm getting excited for this, man. I have this electricity going through me. The worst booking decision of 2015 by the WWE. There is I have 10 pages of options here to go with. This is, holy shit. I think, we should just say everything in general potentially could have been the worst booking decision of the year. So many to choose from. Ben, I'm going to go with the Divas Revolution here. And like I said, there's so many we could have picked. But I've had a big time problem with this for, really since we started the podcast. And our listeners and our viewers know that how big of a problem I've had with the Divas Revolution. And that's why I picked it for worst booking decision of the year. When these ladies came up, they were so over in NXT. It was insane. And let's remember, that's where the Divas Revolution started. It started in NXT. But bringing them up, it sucked all the momentum away from them. It sucked away all their momentum that they had from NXT. Because they put them in teams of 3, which is an absolute, oh my God, a horrible idea to do that. And I predicted that would be a disaster from Jump Street. You remember that. And, I mean, look, the Divas should have been featured as individuals because they're some of the most compelling women, Ben, in WWE history. Let's face it. I mean, they should have been featured. You've never seen girls like this before in wrestling history, really, at least on such a big stage that were, such great characters. And they almost had this, larger-than-life personality to them and aura to them that I've never seen in Divas matches before. So, look.
John owes everybody a beer here.
I do. I did get distracted. My friend FaceTimed me like an idiot. I try to tell everyone we're doing the podcast now. But anyway. So, look, these women were larger than life. They had all the momentum in the world. Yet you put them in a group, which if you put superstars in a group, usually you're trying to hide them from something. You're trying to hide their weakness. Yet these girls didn't have any weaknesses. You should be trying to promote them and giving them as much creative freedom as possible. You limit people when they're in a group. Horrible idea. From when Stephanie said it was her idea right from the beginning and all of that, it left a bad taste in our mouth from day one on that first episode of Raw, and it has continued up to this point where things have just unraveled. We don't know who is a face. We don't know who is a heel. It seems like right now there's only one face in the entire division. People are going back and forth. It's a complete mess right now, and hopefully they can say, starting in the new year, we'll scrap everything we've done and we'll just start it new. We'll build it from scratch and get this division back to where it can be with all these talented women in it, Ben.
Yeah. Man, you make a very good case, and that's I have about 7 or 8 listed here that I had to choose from here. So I'll just go through some of the runners up, and there are many. Bray Wyatt losing to The Undertaker twice, first at WrestleMania and then again at Survivor Series, was horrendous. And as we detailed in an article for Cage Side Seats recently, derailed the Wyatt family to a large degree, in my opinion. I think Roman Reigns winning the Royal Rumble was a horrendous booking decision on many levels and totally misunderstood the crowd in Philadelphia and what it wanted. Sheamus winning Money in the Bank was a horrendous decision. The Divas Revolution, as you mentioned, horrible booking there all the way around. Randy Orton's return back in February was terrible by WWE. He should have been kind of a silent assassin who started RKOing everybody out of nowhere. Instead, he straddled the fence for about a month with the Authority, which made no sense whatsoever because they had injured him when he left a few months before. So that was completely just horseshit booking.
And very forgettable. It was very easy to forget that because that's what type of impact it had on everything, which was nothing. And it should have been one of the biggest storylines of 2015.
Absolutely. So all of those and many others, I think, certainly could be considered the worst booking decision of the year. But I'm going to go with a personal pet peeve of mine for anyone who's been listening to the podcast. That was the handling of the Miz and Damien Mizdow / Damien Sandow angle, at WrestleMania and then the aftermath of it. John, you know how strongly I felt about this. Damien Sandow was a complete fucking joke as sort of this comic relief character where he would impersonate people and come out and just basically get loud. He was Santino Marella, essentially, for months on Monday Night Raw until eventually he became the Miz's stunt double when the Miz was promoting one of his many straight-to-DVD movies that he does for WWE. And somehow, against all greater judgment, this thing worked.
Right.
Miz and Mizdow got this thing over with the crowd. I mean, we watched the Royal Rumble. We keep talking about the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia. He got one of the biggest pops of the night.
Yeah, I think people just felt bad for him, Ben. And they just got behind him because he's like the lovable underdog that keeps getting screwed over by creative.
And then, so that caught fire, and they started playing into it. Miz kept bullying him, Miz got over as a heel big time during that feud because he acted like a complete jerk. And Sandow, by the time WrestleMania came around, the fans were ready to explode for him to finally turn on the Miz, get his revenge, have a blow-off match or two, win the feud, and then he becomes a marketable... I don't think Damien Sandow, at least at this point, is going to be a main event guy, but he is certainly a marketable mid-card babyface, which you need in this company. So all the pieces were set. He turned on The Miz in the Battle Royal, eliminated The Miz, the crowd went nuts, and then immediately the whole thing went to hell. He gets eliminated by The Big Show, who wins the Battle Royal at WrestleMania, which totally took the air out of the crowd and the air out of Damien Sandow. And then they didn't even do a real blow-off match. They did a match on Raw a couple weeks later, which The Miz won. And then Sandow disappeared from television and really hasn't been seen since.
No.
I can't remember the last time I saw him. I know he was doing the Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage ripoff thing briefly with Curtis Axel, and then that
was a complete fucking disaster.
And he's been doing absolutely nothing since then. I can't remember the last time he was even on Monday Night Raw. So this is an example of how not to handle an angle. This thing wasn't supposed to get over. It did. The crowd was legitimately excited and into this angle, and WWE, for whatever reason, chose to disregard that. And in the end, they ruined two guys. The Miz could have been... The Miz is still over as a heel with the Miz TV segment. He hardly works matches anymore.
Yeah, no, he's irrelevant.
He's irrelevant now, and Sandow he's working superstars, basically, at this point, when he could have been a solid mid-card babyface. So, textbook example of how to fuck up an angle, in my opinion, by WWE. That's my worst booking decision of the year, John.
Can't blame me there. I really can't.
Next up here on the hit list, we've got our pay-per-view of the year. John, we also have our worst pay-per-view of the year coming up after this, but what was, in your mind, the best pay-per-view offering WWE put out there in 2015?
Yeah, so I'm going to make this really quick. It was WrestleMania 31, in my opinion. And look, I know people might say, oh, well, that's an obvious answer. That's a chalk answer. But guess what? Let's face it. The last year, 2015, for the WWE, it sucked. It sucked. There wasn't a lot of good programming, okay? So there's not a lot of good things to choose from here. And look, no matter what, no matter how bad WWE programming is, WrestleMania is always an incredible thing. You know, the WWE creative always seems to put something together for WrestleMania, no matter what. You know, there's just all this grandeur, and it's a big thing. It's a pop culture event. So it's really pretty much impossible to fuck up WrestleMania. When WWE fucked up every single other pay-per-view from this past year, pretty much in one way or another. So I know you have a different one that was definitely a good pay-per-view, but I think just by default, WrestleMania, for everything that it provided me and us and the fans, I would have to give that pay-per-view of the year just for sheer entertainment value. I think it was definitely WrestleMania this year.
I can't. It's hard for me to disagree with that. WrestleMania is certainly, always a big time pay per view. You said I'm actually going to give it to Hell in a Cell.
The only other one,
right? The only other one I think is kind of in the running, and I think that's just because that pay per view for me, we both gave it an A on our review show here in the Guilty Pleasures podcast because it delivered in the ring. Bray Wyatt and Roman Reigns had just a hell of a Hell in a Cell match. And The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar, which of course was the WWE Universe's pick for the Slammy, the match of the year. They had a violent. You know, both guys were bleeding. A good finish in the match. Lesnar goes over clean. I remember feeling satisfied after this pay-per-view. There was solid in-ring action, and the main events completely delivered. And the angles, you know, for the most part, at least Roman Reigns moved on toward his main event push. So even kind of looking back in retrospect, there was some finality and some consequence to what happened there. Lesnar moved on from his feud with Undertaker. Undertaker moved on. So there was some closure, I think, to a large degree at this pay-per-view as well as this hellacious work inside Hell in a Cell by all four of those guys. So to me, that from top to bottom was pay-per-view of the year. But WrestleMania is a close second in my book.
Yeah, and let's face it, we had pretty low expectations for Hell in a Cell as well. So it not only did it deliver, but compared to what we thought it would be, you know, that's why we gave it A's, because we thought it was going to be shit. WrestleMania, you expect it to be great, and it was. So I certainly see your point there. Ben, the last category / award / whatever the fuck you want to call these for the episode here, worst pay-per-view of the year. Now we just did best one, so this one's going to be the worst. Now I think there was 10 to choose from, but look, and I think you and I agree on this one, so I'm not going to take every point here, but I'm going to go with Survivor Series. Look, Ben, this is supposed to be a Big Four pay-per-view, which to me makes it so much worse that it was so bad. Because you would think the WWE would actually put more time into making storylines and developing this pay-per-view. I think you and I were both extremely disappointed that there was no heel turn from Ambrose or Roman Reigns. Sheamus became champion, and his championship run was pretty damn weak. The rest of the pay-per-view was absolutely horrible. There was no Cena, there was no Lesnar, there was no Orton, there was no Sasha Banks. The 5-on-5 Survivor Series matches were an absolute joke, in my opinion. There was some good action in one of those, but they were announced the day of the pay-per-view.
Yeah, we didn't know what they were going to be until we sat down to watch the pay-per-view.
Exactly. So, as you can imagine, there was absolutely no build to these matches, which made no one give a shit about the matches. And you know what? That was a perfect example of the overall feel for Survivor Series from this year. It just seemed like the WWE didn't really give a shit about it. There was nothing really creative. I mean, I guess you could say the Sheamus cash-in. I mean, that was something interesting, but like I said, no one really wanted to see that. So it was either like, okay, Roman Reigns will be champion, which no one really wanted to see at that point, or Sheamus will be champion, which no one wanted to see at that point. So WWE put themselves in a lose-lose situation by what they did building up the Survivor Series. To me, this was the worst pay-per-view of the year, especially because when you hear the name Survivor Series, you think that this is a Big Four pay-per-view. You think WWE is going to bring it, and they just flat out didn't. And one more thing, and I just remembered this, the fact that the Wyatts lost in this pay-per-view. And I just thought of that. I mean, you and I thought that was a horrendous booking decision. The Undertaker and Kane did not need to go over here. They are over as can be. Their careers are winding down. The Wyatts, which we talk about every week, they needed this. And they didn't get it. So overall, top to bottom, Survivor Series, disaster, worst pay-per-view of the year.
I wholeheartedly wholeheartedly agree. Look, I had Wyatt losing to Undertaker both times as one of my, in the running for worst booking decision of the year. I still can't get over the fact that the Wyatts did not go over in that match. To me, it made so much sense for everybody involved.
Ridiculous.
It gave the Wyatts credibility. It gave the Undertaker a storyline going into WrestleMania that he's on a losing streak and can't get it done anymore. It just seemed like a golden opportunity to do something really good for all parties involved, and they didn't do it. This pay-per-view was full of bad booking and really bad matches. There's no match that stood out from this. We were excited going into it because we were going to get Kevin Owens and Dean Ambrose, and they didn't really deliver, quite frankly, in the ring. They didn't have a lot of time. And we got the Dean Ambrose-Roman Reigns finals of the tournament, and that really didn't deliver.
I think that was only an 8-minute match, Ben, or something like that. Right.
It was, I was expecting a 20-minute match from those two guys at least, to crown a new world champion. We didn't get that. So there's nothing memorable in terms of in-ring work, and then all the booking I'd rather forget, to be honest with you. It was all horrible. And we talked, I think last week about the fact that it seems WWE intentionally doesn't do what the fans are talking about online. We spent so much time, including on this show, talking about who was going to turn heel, Reigns or Ambrose. So I think Vince McMahon says, well, if everybody's talking about it, we can't do it. So our only other option is to have Sheamus come in and cash in, which, as you said, nobody on earth wanted to see. And I think that's been borne out by the fact that his title reign ended about 4 weeks after it started. So this is a horrendous pay-per-view. I would add just briefly, John, before we move on, I don't think this is a Big Four pay-per-view anymore. I don't. So many years in a row now, I think it's been overshadowed by, I would argue, overshadowed by Money in the Bank and possibly overshadowed by Hell in a Cell, I think, at this point. I mean, certainly Hell in a Cell this year was miles better than Survivor Series, and Money in the Bank has been better than Survivor Series every year for the past few years. So I think it's probably, at this point, WWE can say whatever they want in terms of marketing the event, but to me, this is the 6th, maybe even 7th most important pay-per-view of the year, and that's sad. Because a lot of big moments have happened in Survivor Series.
Right. And I think what might have something to do with that is because, the allure back in the day was that you got to see 5-on-5 matches. And that never really happened. But now, every week or every other week when you turn into Raw or SmackDown, you're getting 6-man tag matches. Oh, yeah. You're getting 8-man tag matches. So you're seeing this type of match happen constantly throughout the year. So when you get a 5-on-5 Survivor Series match, it's not special anymore.
We got an 11-man tag match on Raw a few weeks ago with the League of Nations and New Day against Reigns, Ambrose, and the Usos, for God's sake.
Exactly. Yeah. So why should I give a shit about a 5-on-5 Survivor Series match? Why should I think that it's more special than anything else, especially when there's no build to it? None of the characters talked about it. It was just like, we'll fucking throw them in there last second because no one gives a shit. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's what the pay-per-view is. That's the gimmick of the pay-per-view, and you're not even putting any thought into it. So yeah, I 100% agree with you, man.
Well, John, from there, so that sums up our awards. If you agree, disagree, please hit us up on Twitter at the GP Podcast and on Facebook.com/the GP Podcast. Let us know what you thought about this. John, it's time to move into, I waited a long time to say this, Scumbag of the Year.
Scumbag.
This is where we call out miscreants, deviants, and assholes from all walks of life every week, usually, for Scumbag of the Week. We've had some doozies, but we were able to narrow it down to 3 finalists. And we'll talk about the runners-up here just for a second, and then we'll move into our winner. John, our second runner-up, 3rd place for Scumbag of the Year is Greg Hardy of the Dallas Cowboys. John, would you like to say a few words about Greg Hardy and why exactly he finds himself on this list?
Well, for what a great human being this guy is. I mean, really, let's God almighty. I mean, he's a womanizer. He doesn't care about his team. He only cares about himself. This guy just doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. It's one thing to make a mistake. It's another thing to keep making mistakes, especially the same ones. He doesn't care what people think of him. He doesn't care about women. This guy is just a complete scumbag. I mean, he's the definition of a scumbag.
Yeah.
And everything that he did, since, people found out pretty much that he threw his former girlfriend on a pile of loaded guns. Just every step that he's taken from that till now has been a poor one, especially since he's shown absolutely zero remorse for anything that he's done. Usually when a public figure gets shamed in one way or another, they come out, they say they're sorry, they try to rehabilitate their image. Greg Hardy didn't give a shit about any of that. I guess, it's... in another situation, maybe we could commend him for sort of being his own man and not like, getting into the pressure of society, but not in this case.
Not here.
This is not it. Like, he needed to do this. Terrible decisions on his part. So really for Greg Hardy, the reason he's on this list is because of his decision making.
Yeah.
Over the last year or so. Certainly should be a finalist. I think he was multiple times our scumbag of the week over our first 5 or 6 months of the podcast. Yeah, that's Greg Hardy for you, everyone.
Look, I think all three of our finalists have been multiple scumbags, which is one of the criteria.
Right.
Greg Hardy, convicted of domestic violence, never apologized, tried to defend it on social media, came back after a suspension, and the first thing back, his first game back, they played the Patriots, and he told Gisele Bundchen, Tom Brady's wife, to bring her hot sisters to the game. That's not something that a guy who is convicted of domestic abuse should say.
Just shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up. Why do you have to talk, dude? Why do you have to fucking talk?
The next week goes running up and down the sidelines like a madman, looking like a menace, when it's like, dude, this is your second game back and you've only been on the team for about 3 months. So, like, he just doesn't get it in terms of a football aspect and in terms of his personal life aspect. This guy is not just, as we'd said, look, this guy's not a problem just for the NFL. He's a problem for society in general. And that's why he has been a multiple Scumbag of the Week award winner. And certainly worth a mention here. John, the runner-up to our Scumbag of the Year is, again, no surprise here. That would be Donald Trump, the Republican presidential frontrunner. I still can't believe he's got polls in the Republican primary. I cover politics for a living, and that stuns me to no end. Look, this guy, in addition to everything that he said, sexist things toward women, degrading Mexicans, degrading virtually everyone under the sun. He found himself on this list once again a couple weeks ago when he proposed banning all Muslims from the United States, which, as breaking news in the Guilty Pleasures podcast, we revealed at the time, that is in fact a violation of our constitutional rights. It goes against the First Amendment, if you did not know that as a listener of this show. Look, Donald Trump is clearly a scumbag, and he's a dangerous scumbag because he's a scumbag with a lot of money and a lot of power. And as most of the people the winner certainly falls in this category as well. He's someone who shows no remorse whatsoever for his actions. He's apologized for nothing. He doubles down on everything he says, regardless of how offensive it is. And that, to me, makes him a scumbag. So, John, any thoughts on Donald Trump before we move on to our illustrious winner?
Yeah, it seems like these guys don't understand that they're holding 7-2 unsuited in their Texas Hold'em game of life. Sometimes you just need to fucking fold. Don't keep pushing all of your chips in. It's okay to fold sometimes.
Right.
You said it all about this guy. In a serious note, it's just very scary what's happening here. It's scary that this guy might end up being the president of the United States. It's scary that he might be our leader and that he, as the president, you really... when other countries especially are looking at, the president of the United States, they think that that's what everyone feels in the United States. He represents the values of the entire public.
How are relations with the Muslim world going to go under a Donald Trump administration?
Right. If things aren't bad enough, I think things might just get a tad bit worse. So hopefully America wakes up a little bit. People that listen to this podcast, we probably assume you're not a big fan of Donald Trump, but this is really bad stuff, scary stuff. And so for all of those reasons, he most certainly was a candidate for Scumbag of the Year and a multiple-time offender for sure. And I have a feeling, Ben, that we will be hearing about him more, and he will be a Scumbag of the Week again in 2016.
Yeah, he may end up reappearing on this list at the end of 2016, to be honest with you.
Yes.
Things going the way they are now. But, John, it's now time, finally, and this might come as no surprise to our listeners again. This guy's a multiple-time offender, multiple Scumbag of the Week here. The winner and the Scumbag of the Year,
Dun, dun, dun.
no further ado, is Martin Shkreli, the former CEO of Turing Pharmaceuticals, who was all over the news in recent months.
Really quickly, Ben, does he not? That name is perfect.
Scumbag.
It just perfectly fits him. If I saw his face and the way he acted, that's the name I would come up with for him.
Shkreli, this guy, of course, got the rights to a life-saving HIV treatment, cancer drugs, a lot of medications when he took over Turing Pharmaceuticals, and immediately overnight raised the price of all those drugs by 700%. and then refused to apologize, threatened to raise the price more, and then finally caved and said he would bring the price down and did not. So he lied about it. Now, this guy he's about our age, John. He's 30-something years old, worth about $100 million. It's kind of a playboy lifestyle, complete jerk. He spent $2 million for a Wu-Tang Clan album. It was a gold record or something to that effect. Just constantly seen out there acting like a complete jerk. And it turns out a few weeks ago, he's arrested for securities fraud. So as, for the reason he was named Scumbag of the Week for the second time, this guy's not only screwing over people who are literally on their deathbed just to line his own pockets a little more, but he was lying to investors in his own company, stockholders, using shady business practices to, again, make more money for himself. So he was literally fucking every single person that he could financially, and near as I can tell, showed no remorse for it whatsoever. He even challenged Bernie Sanders to a debate on healthcare policy. That's how cocky this guy is. So to me, this wasn't even close. Donald Trump, Greg Hardy, they certainly deserve a mention on this list, but Martin Shkreli, John, runaway scumbag of the year as far as I'm concerned.
100%. 100%. And remember, he also said that if he could do it again, he would have raised the price more for those drugs because he felt a responsibility to the shareholders of the company, which is who he was fucking. Exactly. Which is just the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. It really is. Look, you said it all. He lied to the public. He even lied about why he increased the price of the drug. He said he was going to do that and use the money for research into improving other drugs. Yeah, that's a complete jerk off. He was voted the most hated man in America, which I think is certainly a reason that he is our scumbag of the year. And look, he's an arrogant glory whore.
Yeah.
It's simple. Who loves the spotlight. And he loves himself, and he can't get enough of hearing himself talk. And look, it got him into trouble. And that's just fantastic. There is some sort of karma, a beautiful thing going on in the universe right now where this fucking douchebag is behind bars or at least just got arrested. And now, Ben, didn't he get fired from this company as well? So, exactly. So he got exactly what he deserved. I hope he gets more shit hitting him in the face. And look, if I was a company, any company in the world, and this guy was trying to be, at the top of the table or the head of the table, there's no fucking way. I don't see him. I would be surprised, Ben, if he got hired anywhere again in a legitimate role.
He's toxic.
He is. Exactly. Why would you want bad public relations for your company? You are automatically getting it if you hire him. Automatically. It's sort of like the Cowboys and Greg Hardy. It's like, boom, you sign Greg Hardy, you're automatically an asshole. And you're going to get shit for it. And that's exactly what is going to happen to a company that hires this motherfucker. So, Martin Shkreli, congratulations, my man. You are the scumbag of the year from the Guilty Pleasures podcast. Once again, every fucking week, we say, bring your ass on the show if you're listening. If you have friends that listen, if you have enemies that listen, we don't give a shit. Bring your ass on the show. We'll debate you about anything you want, and we will make you cry to your mama.
That's right. Look, every man needs to be punched in the face in their lives at least once, and a guy like this clearly has never been punched in the face in his entire life. That's for damn sure.
Exactly.
I think he will be when he spends the rest of his life in prison.
Damn right. Hopefully he does. Woo! Ben, let's try to come down a little bit here off of that high. Good Lord. Look, we are now ready for our NFL award segment. Every week on the podcast, if this is your first time tuning in, we talk about the week that was in the NFL. We also give our predictions about games that are coming up this upcoming Sunday. We tell you where to bet against the lines. But this week, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to give awards away for the NFL, certain players and teams and coaches that should be recognized for the great job that they've done this year, and in a couple cases, the poor job that they have all done this year. So let's hop right in here, Ben. The first one is NFL MVP, and I think this is probably the most obvious one that we're going to have out of all these awards, sort of like Superstar of the Year for our WWE segment. Look, it's a no-brainer to me. This is Cam Newton. This is Superman. I had him as my MVP 8-10 weeks ago. I really did, and he is unbelievable. What he is doing with the weapons that he has around him, which is pretty much nothing, it is absolutely incredible. You could say to a point, well, his stats weren't that great. and that was up till about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And then the last 3 or 4 weeks, he has been an absolute monster. He's been putting up incredible stats, multiple games of about 4 or 5 touchdowns with no picks. Rushing touchdowns, rushing yards. This guy is putting this team on his fucking back. The whole narrative about him not being a good leader and jokes around too much and this and that, he doesn't care. Hopefully that all goes out the window, because I don't think that was fair to begin with to put on this guy. I got to be honest, Ben, I think there was a little bit of racism going on there with that. I think if he was a white quarterback, he wouldn't have gotten all that. They would have called it charisma, but it's because he's an African American. It's whatever. But Cam Newton deserves all the praise that he is getting. He is undoubtedly my NFL MVP for 2015 so far. And really quickly, before I toss it to you, I do want to give a little bit of love to my man Carson Palmer, who I've talked about for the last 4 or 5 weeks, really, that if it was not for Cam Newton and his Superman-esque heroics lately, Carson Palmer would be the MVP of this league. He has led this Cardinals team really to an incredible record, and they look borderline unstoppable right now. I think if you and I were to pick, I think we'd have the Cardinals beat the Panthers if they face each other in the playoffs. So, and look, a lot of credit goes to Carson Palmer for that. He came back from a devastating knee injury last year to put up the best numbers of his career. He is leading probably what we think is the best team in the NFL. I think he's going to win another category for me later on in the show. But look, both of these guys absolutely deserving of this. If they got co-MVP, I would be fine with that. But, I think Cam Newton is definitely your MVP because he has a lot less work to work with on offense than Carson Palmer does.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, look, the Cardinals are a loaded team, both offensively and defensively. The Panthers, their defense certainly is pretty stout, but offensively, look, we're heading into Week 17 of the NFL season, and I'm still hard-pressed to name a lot of offensive players on the Carolina Panthers.
Ted Ginn is their number one receiver, okay? That's how you know you're in fucking trouble.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Olsen, Jonathan Stewart, but I mean, look, Cam Newton just does not have the type of weapons that Carson Palmer does. This guy, look, he had to step up. There was no choice. I mean, that's what the category is, right? The most valuable player to your team. This team would have gone down the toilet if Cam Newton did not have a spectacular year, and he did. I mean, you can argue that if Carson Palmer's stats had been a little bit worse, they still would have been able to have a good season. Maybe if Tom Brady's stats were down a little bit, maybe the Patriots could still get it done. But if Cam Newton didn't deliver, this team was going nowhere fast. And so I think for that reason alone, he's the runaway MVP. The guy, as you said, we kept waiting for him to drop off, and it never really happened. In fact, it kept getting better. The past few weeks have been his best statistical weeks of the entire season. The guy's a complete fantasy monster, especially over the past month or so of the season. So, look, the guy deserves it. He got a lot of criticism. Some of it, I think, probably was at least partially motivated by race. But this guy came out, and he's delivered right now. I think he's put a lot of doubters to rest. So he is most certainly my NFL MVP. And, John, that leads us into our next category, which is the most surprising team of the year. Surprising being in a positive, like the team that you didn't see, maybe making the playoffs or having a winning record. And that, for me, John, is the Carolina Panthers, who I did not pick to make the playoffs. I know I picked the New Orleans Saints to come out of that division and didn't have the Panthers as one of the wild cards. We thought that the fact that they were essentially, at least they looked on paper, to be devoid of talent offensively when the year started. I think even now it was a logical move to not think the Panthers. That looked like a 7-9 football team to me at the start of the year. But man, I mean, to go undefeated until the last week when they finally dropped a game. The Falcons, they're going to finish at worst 14-2, at best 15-1. That's unbelievable for a team that has that kind of roster on offense. Having lost Kelvin Benjamin, their one explosive player before the season even started. I did not see that coming. Even John, even in week 8 or 9, I would have said, I think this team's going to fall off and end up being like a 10-6, 11-5 at best football team, but they just kept on rolling.
Right, we weren't sold on the Panthers until very late in the season. We did think that fall was going to come at least a little bit.
I did. I certainly did, and it never did. So look, they still have something to prove in the playoffs. I think we're going to have to see what they can do. Can they beat a team like the Cardinals? Can they beat a team like the Seahawks that's been there and done that before in the postseason? That remains to be seen, but there really is no one even close, to be honest with you, in terms of who surprised me the most this year. It's definitely the Panthers.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. I do want to give some love here to the Redskins and the Vikings. I think, look, I didn't think the Vikings were going to be good.
And then the Jets, too, as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, though, some people had the Vikings as like a shady sleeper team. And look, they deserve the credit for saying that and picking them maybe to go to the playoffs. But I didn't see it personally. They were horrible the year before. So no matter even what your expectations were, the fact that they had such a gigantic turnaround makes them very surprising. The Redskins, let's face it, who picked the Redskins to win the NFC East in the beginning of the year?
Nobody.
Maybe the poor guy in Washington, D.C., and that's pretty much it, the guy who lives on the street. Because, look, anyone with any knowledge here of football knew that the Redskins had the least amount of talent in that division. But because of injuries and because of weird circumstances in that NFC East, the Redskins have won the division and clinched it a week before the end of the regular season. So they deserve a ton of credit as one of the most surprising teams. No one saw that, but it is the Carolina Panthers because of the lack of offensive talent that they have. Look, Ted Ginn drops more passes than he catches. And somehow Cam Newton still manages to put up these unbelievable numbers. Greg Olson's a beast. We all know that. But you can only do so much with a good tight end and nothing on the outside. So Jonathan Stewart had a very good year as well. But I would attribute that to the fact that Cam Newton is a dual threat. Running backs have better years when the quarterback can not only pass, but he can run as well. Alfred Morris, the perfect example from when RG3 was quarterback of the Redskins. He had incredible years. He was a top 5 running back in football. So, Jonathan Stewart, while he is good, he has benefited from Cam Newton. Everyone has. They are extremely surprising. I didn't have them in the playoffs as well. But, look, Ron Rivera deserves credit. This defense... It's almost like we forgot how good they were. They were very good the previous few years, and then last year, they just weren't good for some reason. They had some injuries, but they didn't play up to their potential. But this year, they're back. Yeah. And this defensive unit is dominant. Because of their record last year, and because of where they are right now, the Panthers absolutely have to be the most surprising team, for sure. With that being said, Ben... the opposite coin here, the most disappointing team of this year. And for me, there were a lot more options for disappointing team as opposed to surprising team.
Yeah.
I had 5 options that I was picking from. Cowboys, Ravens, Colts, Lions, Eagles. Mm-hmm. They were all massive disappointments to me. The Ravens, I didn't have them making the playoffs, but a lot of people had them going very far, some people even in the Super Bowl. They've been horrible. The Cowboys are probably the most disappointing team, in my opinion, overall. But I feel like I have to discount them because of injuries. And Tony Romo got hurt. And look, you're just not going to win with a Matt Castle or a Brandon Weeden or someone as your starting quarterback. The Colts, same thing can be said. Andrew Luck hurt, even though he wasn't playing well in the beginning of the season. The Lions overall feel like just underachieved. They have so much talent. They just didn't put it together till later in the season. But for me, the most disappointing team is the Philadelphia Eagles. Like I said, everyone else had major injuries. They didn't have any big injuries, the Philadelphia Eagles. It seemed like everything was in place for them to do what they did in the preseason, and they just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why they are my most disappointing team, was that they felt like massive underachievers because, especially being in Philly, everyone thought they were going to be this unbelievable powerhouse by the preseason that they had. And that just shows the intelligence of Philadelphia Eagles fans, that they thought their preseason success would transfer to regular season success. But that's another story. But yeah, Chip Kelly, there was a lot of hype around him and what he would do in his second season. The Eagles traded for Sam Bradford. People thought that was an upgrade over Nick Foles. They got DeMarco Murray, who was a leading rusher last year in the NFL. They thought that would be an upgrade over Shady McCoy. And look, it just didn't pan out. And they were an extreme disappointment, especially in an NFC East division that even if they were decent or average, they could have won. And the fact that they couldn't win that division, being pretty much fully healthy, with probably the most talent out of any team in that division, speaks volumes. They are my most disappointing team of 2015.
And hard to argue with that. And we should also report here, breaking news on the Guilty Pleasures podcast,
Yes.
that Chip Kelly has been fired just about a half hour before we went on the air here. So that's a little surprising. I thought they might give him another year, but he's gone.
Yeah, which sort of validates my pick here, I think.
Yeah.
Because if they weren't a disappointing team, he wouldn't have been fired.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's amazing, though, that you give a guy all that power, allow him to just totally tear your roster down and build it back up again, and then ship him out of town before the season's even over.
You give him 15 games to try to make that team amazing. I mean, that's just ridiculous. You have a new quarterback, new running back. You lost your 2 top receivers. I mean, you got Kiko Alonso. You had new defensive pieces come in. Like, look, you need to give this guy some chance. I hate the Eagles. I'm not an Eagles fan whatsoever. People that listen to the podcast know this. But even I am sympathizing with Chip Kelly in this situation. He deserved more time because, let's face it, he is a good coach. He's a brilliant offensive mind. He just needed time to make adjustments. I think they made a bad decision here, and I think the Eagles are going to feel it.
I think that's probably true. I mean, look, it's going to be tough to really see. Look, I mean, how exactly are we going to get an upgrade over Chip Kelly? Who do the Eagles go after here in terms of their coach? I don't know.
And you're still going to have the same roster.
His roster that he
Right, exactly. I mean, I don't see it, man. But who knows? Maybe they get a big hire.
It's a strange situation. I think that's for sure in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles. Look, John, my most disappointing team, and you mentioned them, it's the Indianapolis Colts. Now I know they had some injuries. We both picked them to go to the Super Bowl out of the AFC. They probably won't even make the playoffs in the AFC at this point. I know Andrew Luck was hurt. He's still hurt. Looks like that might have been part of the reason he was playing poorly. So the fact that they might have had a less than stellar record or not lived up to my expectations, that's not that much of a shock. I think the reason for the most disappointing team is I didn't see the massive dysfunction coming from the Indianapolis Colts at the start of the year. This team turned into a complete dumpster fire with reports of infighting in the locker room, fights between the GM and the owner, fights between the owner, Jim Irsay, and the coach, Chuck Pagano, who I imagine has to be on his way out of town when this season is over. The offensive players we thought might make a difference, Andre Johnson, Frank Gore, I don't know where either of them have gone this season, especially lately. They've been nowhere to be found. Look, this team disappointed in all facets. Certainly you can attribute some of it to injuries and the Andrew Luck injury specifically, but let's not forget they did win some games behind Matt Hasselbeck, quarterback, earlier in the year because they had a lot of talent on that team. But for whatever reason, whether you blame it on Chuck Pagano or just a dysfunctional locker room, a lack of leadership at the top, a meddlesome owner who gets arrested for having painkillers in his car and can't keep, a la Jerry Jones, can't keep his hands out of the football team's business. This team just seemed to go from kind of, an on-the-rise, almost model franchise a couple of years ago with Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy there in Indianapolis to just a complete mess in a couple of years, and that really surprised me. So the fact that they're so disappointing on the field and probably won't even make the playoffs is a part of it. The fact that they've sunk to almost Oakland Raiders level dysfunction at this point is also a big part of it to me. So they're the most disappointing team in the NFL in 2015.
I mean, you make valid points, man. I think the Eagles and the Colts certainly get that award. I could see that, both of them getting it.
Right.
A co-disappointing team of the year.
No question about it. We'll go on to something a little more optimistic here, though.
Yes.
The comeback player of the year. I know you alluded to yours earlier. I'll just give mine very quickly. I'm giving this to Adrian Peterson, who missed virtually all of last year because of his own domestic abuse situation where he was suspended from the league. There were people wondering, A, is he ever going to play again? B, if he does play again, is he going to come back to the Minnesota Vikings? Do they even want to have him back? Will the fans accept him? Will the league let him back in? There were a lot of questions around this guy who, let's not remember, just a few years ago was also comeback player of the year after coming back from a devastating injury. So he's had some physical ailments to overcome. This guy has come back, and he's come back in a big way. Over 1,400 yards rushing in 2015, over 200 yards receiving. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns. He's a beast. He's getting old. He seems to defy age. Every week he goes out there, just bowls people over, John.
He's not a human.
He's a physical specimen.
Yeah, he's not a human being.
It's really quite amazing to me. And the fact that, so you have that, the physical aspect of this guy, somehow doesn't age and just seems to get stronger and tougher every single year. And the fact that, look, this is a serious emotional burden that had to be on him, the situation that he went through. Whether you blame him, think he's a horrible father, whatever the case may be, he had a lot of shit going on in his life to deal with, and it had to be hard to get his mind back on football. But man, he's done it, and he's got his team in position to make the playoffs here and maybe even win the NFC North if they beat the Green Bay Packers on Sunday. So amazing for, it seems pretty rare, at least to me, John, where you might have a player who's comeback player of the year twice in their career. So that's certainly impressive. Adrian Peterson gets the nod here for me.
I can't argue against that, Ben. I really can't. But my comeback player of the year is Carson Palmer. And he had a devastating knee injury at the end of last year. And look, he came back and is playing the best football of his career. And we were talking about him as an MVP candidate.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the definition to me of a comeback player of the year. You have a devastating injury, you come back, and you play the best football you ever had in your entire career. I mean, this guy deserves a ton of credit. I'm not going to go over all the reasons again because I did in my MVP case for him. But, I respect the hell out of him, and he deserves a ton of credit. He obviously put in a ton of work to get back to where he is right now, playing the best football he ever has, and leading probably the best team in football right now. And especially at a position, the quarterback position, which is not only, very physically demanding, but it's very emotionally and mentally demanding. You have to be sharp all the time, and the fact that he had to deal with his rehab and still came back mentally as sharp as he's ever been and everything else, this guy deserves a ton of credit. He's certainly my comeback player of the year, Ben.
Yeah, let's not forget, a couple of years ago, he was out of football. People thought he might never play again. Then he got relegated to Oakland. So this guy's career has certainly come back to a large degree. And he seems like a pretty upstanding guy, too.
Yeah, and he's been through a ton of stuff. You remember that nasty injury he had when he was in Cincinnati, and the Pittsburgh Steelers lineman went low to his knee. That's when the Bengals were on the up and up with Chad Johnson and TJ Houshmandzadeh and all those guys. They were a team to be reckoned with. So that started at the beginning of his career, everything he's been through. This guy deserves it. Even if it's a lifetime achievement award of coming back so many times, he certainly deserves it. Ben, our last award for the NFL here is our Coach of the Year. And I feel like there's a decent amount of candidates here. There's been a lot of great coaching jobs in the league this year, for sure. Look, I have a list of 5 guys here that I think certainly deserve it. Jay Gruden, for what he's done in Washington. And we talked about this before, the fact that he had the balls to choose Kirk Cousins over RG3. He had the balls to stand up to Daniel Snyder. When everyone thought he was a moron for doing it, he stuck to his guns, and it is paying huge dividends. Kirk Cousins looks like a great quarterback right now. At least he's playing great. I don't know if he's a great quarterback, but he's playing unbelievable football right now. They're talking about maybe signing him to an extension, when before, at the beginning of the season, who would have known? So Jay Gruden deserves a ton of credit. Todd Bowles for the New York Jets. Deserves a ton of credit. Let's face it, man, and I hate to rip on you here, but Rex Ryan leaves the Jets. They didn't make the playoffs. Todd Bowles comes in, and they're a completely different team. Offensively, they're pretty potent. Defensively, they're fantastic. It just looks like he has the defensive mind of Rex Ryan. They're still playing unbelievably defensive football without the bullshit and without the offensive deficiencies. He seems like whatever he's doing, it's working. The offense is playing well. And in Jets history, they've never really had a great offense. So Todd Bowles deserves a ton of credit in his first year with the team. Bill Belichick, of course. The Patriots dealing with so many injuries. He could be Coach of the Year every year. Andy Reid deserves some credit. And no one's talking about Andy Reid, former Eagles coach. But look, man, the Chiefs have had a lot of injuries. Jamal Charles going down was a huge one.
The team was a train wreck earlier in the
year. And they turned their season around. And with backup players in certain positions, he has coached Alex Smith to be a pretty decent NFL quarterback when before he went to Andy Reid, he was pretty much a mess. So Andy Reid just deserves a ton of credit. But my Coach of the Year is Ron Rivera. And I know we're going Panthers heavy here, but look, his team went 15-1, and we didn't have them making the playoffs. It's just that simple. Do I think Ron Rivera is the best coach in football? No. Do I think that he had a ton to do with the team being this good? No, probably not. But they are this good, and they almost went undefeated, so you have to give him some credit here. Give me Ron Rivera for this year.
Hard to argue with that. I mean, I totally agree with the Andy Reid call, by the way. He doesn't seem to be getting a lot of love from people. That's a pretty amazing coaching job. I mean, they lost some key pieces earlier in the year, and it looked like this team was just headed down the tubes, and somehow he was able to right the ship. So they got some leadership on that team with Andy Reid and Alex Smith.
Yeah, and really quickly, he lured Jeremy Maclin to the Chiefs too. So, I mean, you have to give him credit for that as well. It was Andy Reid that did it. It wasn't anyone else.
That's true. Look, you mentioned my coach of the year, and it's Jay Gruden, because living here in Washington, D.C., I can't tell you how big of a deal this was when he benched RG3 before the season even started.
Yeah.
And said that Kirk Cousins got the starting job. People down here, especially the media, were ready to run this guy out of town on a rail with a pitchfork up his ass because of that coaching decision, benching the Golden Boy before a snap had even taken place in the 2015 season. But look, the guy never flinched one time, even earlier in the year when the Redskins didn't look like a great team. They had a losing record at a couple points earlier in the year. Looked like they were on their way to a 6-10, 7-9 season, which is kind of always where the Redskins seem to be in that range. And he never backed down from Kirk Cousins. And look, that, to me, the fact that he was able to do that, to stay strong in the face of incredible criticism, you have to imagine incredible pressure from Daniel Snyder, who is probably the second most, maybe third most meddlesome owner in the NFL behind Jim Irsay and Jerry Jones. Yeah. That's amazing to me. Other coaches of lesser stature have wilted before under that kind of pressure from Daniel Snyder. And we've seen Mike Shanahan blow up publicly because of his relationship with RG3 and Daniel Snyder. And somehow Jay Gruden was able to navigate that, all the while getting this football team to the top of their division and ultimately into the playoffs. So a lot of pressure on him from day one, both on and off the field, in the offices, certainly in the locker room. And he was able to withstand it. So, look, this guy to me, right now, looks like a great hire by the Redskins in retrospect. He's my coach of the year, John.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think I think Ron Rivera and Jay Gruden are 1 and 2 for sure. I made that point before. Jay Gruden deserves an absolute ton of credit here.
Absolutely.
Ben, moving on here. Now we just did our awards, but we're going to still make picks this week, as we do every single week. You and I are having pretty good seasons here. We're both over 500. So, like we say every week, if you've been betting with us, you're making money. So hop on board, for fuck's sake.
You got 1 week left in the regular season.
But we're going to be doing the playoffs too. That's for damn sure. But here are our Week 17 picks. Ben, let's keep these really short here. My first game here is the New England Patriots heading to Miami to play the Dolphins. This is a huge line. The Patriots are favored by 10 on the road, but I don't give a shit. I'm taking the New England Patriots, and it's as simple as this. The New England Patriots are playing for a number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. They have Super Bowl aspirations. The Miami Dolphins are a complete dumpster fire. They've given up this year. They have no heart.
They've put on Dan Campbell.
They absolutely have. There's no doubt about it. And the strength of this team, which was supposed to be their defense, signing Ndamukong Suh. Where the fuck has he been, by the way? No one's heard of him in the last 12 weeks. This team, they just seem flat. They're not giving Lamar Miller the ball enough, who's their best player. Ryan Tannehill has regressed this year. And I think Bill Belichick is going to have a field day with his defense going against Miami's offense. I think this could get ugly, even if you ignore all my other points, simply because the Patriots have something to play for and the Dolphins don't. Take the Patriots, even though it's -10.
Totally agree there. This could be a bloodbath because the Patriots, when they're, coming off a loss.
Right, exactly.
In controversial fashion to the Jets. We know how they are after a loss, especially when they have something to play for. Home field advantage.
Yeah.
John, the Packers are at home against the Minnesota Vikings here with the NFC North title on the line. The Packers are a 3-point favorite, which to me, even though the Packers just got waxed by the Cardinals this past week, losing by 30. That still seems like a pretty low line for a division game at home at Lambeau Field. I like the Packers here. 3 points is not enough to scare me off. They get a bounce back. The Vikings while a good team, kind of a nice story this year. Certainly, I praised Adrian Peterson a lot. I think they've been a little bit over their heads
Yeah.
the past couple of weeks. They're not as good as they've looked. I think the Packers are certainly better than they looked against a juggernaut Cardinals team this past week. So I like the Packers here. I think this could be a touchdown win for them. They tend to play well in big games with a lot of stakes, especially at home. So 3 points, not enough to scare me away here. I like the Green Bay Packers.
It's funny. We didn't talk about our picks before we went on the air, but I like the Packers as well. Look, I mean, this is an interesting game because it's a battle for the division. I think this game probably has the most stakes on the line, or it's probably at least the most interesting game for this weekend, at least in my opinion. Look, the Vikings crushed the Giants this past week, okay? But look, I think the public might be a little bit higher on the Vikings than they should be by that game. Because of that game, it was in prime time. Everyone saw it. You might be getting a little, ooh, the Vikings, but the Giants had just found out pretty much that they were eliminated from the playoffs before they played that game. That is deflating to a football team. So they knew going into that game that they had nothing to play for, and they didn't have their best player in Odell Beckham Jr., who was suspended for the game. So I don't put a ton of stock into that Vikings win. I think the Giants quit towards the end of that game. And yeah, I think the Packers in December at home, that still means something. The fact that I said the same thing. The fact that this is a 3-point line is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Vegas is basically saying that on a neutral field, these teams are exactly the same. And to me, they're not. The Packers still are a better team to me because you still have Aaron Rodgers versus Teddy Bridgewater. And I think that, look, this is the biggest game that Teddy Bridgewater has ever played in his career. And he's going on the road to Green Bay, which is one of the hardest places to play. I don't see him having a great game, and I think the Packers' defense actually comes up pretty big here playing at home. But yeah, I definitely like the Packers to win by 7 to 10 points here for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there you go. That's easy money right there.
It is.
We did not discuss it beforehand before we came on the air. That's for damn sure. Look, we've made a lot of money betting against Cleveland all year, so I'm going to bet against Cleveland again right here. Because
we should have talked about our picks. God damn it. Go ahead.
The Pittsburgh Steelers are at Cleveland. They're favored by 8.5 points. This could be a 30-point game. The Cleveland Browns are a complete mess. The Pittsburgh Steelers right now, believe it or not, are on the outside looking in of the playoffs, with the Jets and the Chiefs have the wild card spot. So they need a win here if they're going to get into the playoffs. We've talked for the past few weeks about them being the most dangerous team in the NFL, possibly. Well, they're not going to be very dangerous if they don't get into the playoffs. Right. So they need to come to play at Cleveland. Look, talent-wise, this isn't close. Cleveland's gotten blown out multiple times this year. I think it happens again. This could be a 2-touchdown, 3-touchdown drubbing by the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are angry and have something to play for. So put your money on Pittsburgh here.
Yeah, I took the Steelers as well. You said everything that I need to say. The Steelers are playing for something. Cleveland isn't. Cleveland is devoid of talent. Pittsburgh is rich in talent, to say the least. They lost last week. They're pissed off about it. They're playing for something. I think this offense, like you said, just explodes this week. Cleveland can't stop the run, and they can't stop the pass. That's really bad news for the Steelers, who can run the ball almost better than anyone and who throw it almost better than anyone. This is going to be really fucking ugly. Really ugly. If you're playing fantasy football for some reason in Week 17, if you're into DraftKings like I am or FanDuel, Steelers defense this week is a great defense to stream because Steelers are going to be ahead. Cleveland's going to have to throw it, and the Steelers are going to force Cleveland into making a good amount of mistakes. I could see at least one pick-six touchdown here. I think the Steelers defense at least has one touchdown, maybe two, potentially. This is going to be a blowout, Ben, for sure. Even though it's a division game, even though the Steelers are on the road, I just think because of the stakes that are involved and the fact that Cleveland's defense is non-existent, especially since they don't have Joe Hayden, Steelers are going to crush them. Take the Steelers with confidence.
You know, John, so I know we agreed on at least two of our picks here, but I think I am going to possibly surprise you here with my last pick. The Arizona Cardinals are favored at home by 6.5 against the Seattle Seahawks. We just have been praising the Arizona Cardinals as possibly the best team in football. I like the Seahawks here, John, in this game, and the reason for that is pretty simple. I think by the time this game is played, I think that they will probably realize that they don't have anything to play for because the Carolina Panthers earlier in the afternoon will have beaten the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Great point.
For the playoffs, if the Panthers beat the Bucs, as I expect that they will,
Great
they'll
point.
be 15-1, and then at 4:25 in the afternoon, Arizona will host Seattle, and I expect possibly rest some players, maybe a Larry Fitzgerald or a Carson Palmer. So I think you could get the B team for the Arizona Cardinals to some degree. They're going to try to not get people hurt heading into the playoffs. I actually see a Seattle win here in this game. So I say put your money on the Seahawks. Now, of course, all bets are off if the Panthers drop that game to the Bucs, but I don't think that's going to happen. I like the Panthers to beat the Bucs and wrap up home field advantage, and then the Seahawks to go into Arizona and get the win here, John.
Yeah, that's a good pick. That's a good pick. I'm wondering though if Seattle has their position locked up, if maybe they bench their players as well. So I hope they don't, because this is a really intriguing game. Two of the best teams in the league. Hopefully both of these teams play all of their starters just for the sheer entertainment value. But that's an interesting game to keep an eye on for sure. Ben, that wraps up NFL segment for us this week, our end of the year episode 23 of the Guilty Pleasures podcast. To all of our listeners and viewers, if you disagree, if you agree with any of our choices here for these categories, please be sure to reach out to us at the GP Podcast on Twitter. We would love to hear your opinions and your thoughts on everything we just talked about. But Ben, moving on here, the last segment of this episode is called Last Call Life Advice. Take it away. Explain to the viewers and the listeners how this came about.
Absolutely. Look, John and I love to drink, often find ourselves in late-night drinking establishments, whether it's bars or house parties. And over the years, we've found, really going back to our college days at Shippensburg University, that people came up to us and asked us for advice on career path, on education, on relationships, on stock tips. There's a whole variety of things that we're not qualified to talk about. But, hey, we give that advice, especially when we are drunk. So we started this segment called Last Call Life Advice to impart some of this wisdom to you. And for our year-end episode, John and I have gone back and combed previous episodes of the Guilty Pleasures podcast. We've given nearly 24 pieces of last call life advice, each of us now, over the course of this show, and we decided to pick out the best piece of advice we've given over the course of this year and reiterate it to you as something of a New Year's resolution or a goal that maybe you may want to implement in your own life heading into 2016. John, I'll take this first and keep this pretty short because I've said this before in the show. My best piece of life advice I've given to our listeners throughout this year is to learn how to discuss and or have an argument with someone with whom you disagree about a topic without getting angry and uncivil, and how much happier that can make you and how much stress that can eliminate from your life. Look, it's the holiday season. Everybody's got that tea party uncle or that communist grandpa or whatever the case may be, and it's amazing how uncomfortable your family dinners can become because the vast majority of people are unable to have a discussion, whether it's about politics or some hot-button social issue, even disagreeing. I've seen people getting knocked down, drag-out fights over their NFL picks, for example.
Yeah, even a family recipe or something like that. Yeah.
But if you can get to a point where you can have a conversation with someone, if you're on opposite sides of the political spectrum, sit down and have a beer and not be gritting your teeth the whole time, but actually be able to listen to what they have to say, rebut their points, talk about it, maybe even argue about it, but neither of you get angry and you're still both able to enjoy your time, enjoy each other's company. It's amazing the amount of stress that can take out of your life and how much it can improve your relationships and how much it can increase your social circle when all of a sudden you don't have to find yourself only looking to hang out with people that you agree with on all of these topics all throughout your life. So if you're able to do that, just sort of kind of put your own ego in check and not get pissed off at someone who disagrees with you just because they disagree with you. Recognize that maybe you're wrong on an issue, or maybe you can at least learn something about an issue by listening to that person. That goes a long way in all facets of your life, and that is my life advice of 2015.
Fantastic advice. I surely try to take that advice, no doubt about it, and I've become more open when listening to people for sure. I think I've been like that throughout my life, but everyone can always improve on that for sure. So great advice there, Ben. Look, my last call life advice for this year, for my favorite one, and it's relevant to us really this week or for next week, is to ask for what you want, Ben.
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple. And I remember giving this a while ago. I think it might have been 4 or 5 months ago. It sounds so easy, but it isn't. A lot of people shy away from asking for what they want because they don't want to create a stir or they don't want to be rejected or something like that. But the best things in life, it seems, come to people who ask for something, who want something, who go out of their way to try to get something. And the fact of the matter is that if you don't ask for something, how is someone supposed to know that you want it, that you're trying to ask, right? People aren't mind readers. You know, you'd be surprised the things that you can get if you just ask for them, you know? But if you never ask for something, especially something important, you'll never get it. It's just that simple. Look, and the perfect example, Ben, and it happened this past week, actually yesterday, and it's going to have an impact on our episode next week, is that we got Gino Morasco on the show next week, the guy from the head writer from Cage Side Seats, because we flat out asked him, and we went for it. And instead of questioning ourselves, like if he would respond to us, or what if he doesn't like the podcast, or something like that, we said, fuck it, and we went for it, and we asked him, and guess what? He said yes. He said he would love to come on the show. But if we didn't ask for what we wanted, if we didn't go for it, he never would have came on the show.
Or
and
try to dance around it, or hint at it, or, you know,
exactly.
What he thinks, and bullshit.
Right. Go after it. Be straight up, be upfront, ask for what you want, and you'll be surprised, because people don't like saying no, Ben. Most people don't like saying no. So people are going to say yes more than they say no. So ask for what you want. I guarantee you, you will get more of what you want in the upcoming year.
That's great advice. And I've used that to great effect lately in my life as well, with tremendous results.
Same, man. I've used it all year long, and it's paid off in every aspect. Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps it up. Episode 23, our special year-end edition of the Guilty Pleasures podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in, whether you're listening or you're watching, whether it's YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you to all of our loyal listeners and viewers as well. We have always appreciated your support. Be sure to check us out on social media at the GP Podcast. We are always live tweeting during Monday Night Raw and usually on Sundays during the football games. And be sure to check out our episode next week when we have the Gino Morasco from Cage Side Seats coming on our show. We are extremely excited about that. And for all of our wrestling fans, I mean, this is a dream come true. He's one of the biggest names in the journalism industry for pro wrestling. So, Ben, anything else you want to say before we head off the air?
Just, hey, thanks once again to all of our loyal listeners and viewers. It's been a great ride in 2015, and 2016 is going to be the year of the Guilty Pleasures podcast, and we're going to get started next week with a bang with Gino Morasco on the show.
Absolutely. So tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your family members about the Guilty Pleasures podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of your support. Have a great new year. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.